Hi, thank you for joining us. I have a wonderful panel of four other people today, and we're talking about, we veered off a bit from the secret of love, although I think you're going to see that there are definitely um, relationships here between stress and love, but we're primarily focused on a new understanding about stress because there's a lot of misunderstanding that actually leads to greater stress for people. So I'm so happy to have share this time with my four panelists, and I'm going to just send it over to them whenever you want to, if you want to take a turn. Your screen will light up, and if you'll just say your name, where you're from, what you do, and what has changed for you and how you look at stress now and how that has benefited you and the people you work with. So, and at the end, I'll tell you a little personal story that is such a great example. It's from a client of mine. It will be anonymous, of course, but such a great example of what happens when we look at things differently. Okay, so I want to hear from the four of you. Who wants to go?
Go on, Elizabeth, you go first.
Oh, I go first. Okay. I normally go first, but now I was like waiting, but no, I'm still going first. So, hi, I'm Elizabeth Lovius. I work with leaders. So, you know, they have a lot of stress or their experiences at least. And I've been working with, I've probably worked with over 10,000 people for 30 years. So I've seen it all in the corporate setting.
Corporate setting, I think you said. I think you're frozen.
Can you hear me?
We hear you, but your screen is frozen.
Yeah. Okay, great.
But we hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just keep going. Yeah, so I've been working really with how do you liberate potential? You know, how do you grow as a person, as a leader? How do you lead people through difficult times? How do you work with change? Because, you know, as we know, change is pretty much the only thing we can count on, is the uncertainty of life. Now, I think what I would have said about myself before I came to a true understanding of stress is that I was probably very interested in trying to control my circumstances so that I wouldn't feel stressed. And I think that's really common. I think that's really common in business. You know, they do risk assessments and they do forward planning so that they can try and, I can see that I'm cutting out. I'm so sorry about this. I'm just wondering if I switch my video off, if that helps, or can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Shall I just keep going?
Yeah. We hear you when you're
okay.
not anymore. Yeah.
Okay, great. So if there's any problems, just let me know in the chat, and otherwise I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
You know, so as a person, I was probably quite interested in control and controlling life and controlling as much as I could control. And so, you know, on top of it. And as a character in the world, you know, I wanted to achieve things and make things happen. So you put those two things together and you've got a really quite a busy mind and a busy person. And I think I was just innocently trying to do my best at making life work. But what I didn't know, and that I came to see, and this has really impacted how I work with others, and especially, most importantly, my own experience of life, is I was innocently creating my own stress, because I thought what I was doing was trying to minimize my stress, right, by controlling the outside world and you know, second guessing what might go wrong and making sure it wouldn't, or taking lots of actions to achieve things. So there was a lot going on, but a simple understanding really had me realize that it is actually impossible for our circumstances to be the cause of our stressful experience in the moment. And I just tell you a little vignette, because actually what I would say to many people when I'm teaching leadership and leadership development is the thing that's taught me more about leadership than anything is being a parent, because it gets really real and you get very invested when you're a parent. And I remember starting to notice when I came across this understanding of stress that we're going to talk about today, that sometimes the kids in the back seat, I have 2 sons, would fight. And I would feel this feeling in my stomach, which I would call stress. And I would absolutely know that it was coming from the back seat, right? From what the kids were doing in the back seat. But then after I started to understand more about stress, I started to notice that sometimes that was true, but sometimes they'd do what they were doing and I wouldn't even notice it. It would just wash over me. And sometimes I would think it was funny. And then sometimes on a really good day, I'd be like the world's best parent and handle it really brilliantly with wisdom and patience. And I started to notice that they were consistently doing what they were doing in the back seat, which was basically fighting. And my experience was a variable. So that was really fascinating. And I started to notice that there's this hidden variable at play, which is actually the one that dictates the feeling in my stomach, not the boys in the back seat. No matter how compelling it was that they would, it looked like it was that. And I started to realize that there was something, I'm just going to call for now state of mind. There was something happening inside of me that was creating my experience, this power inside of me. And I started to get really interested in that and study that. And I think what I saw was that even that I wasn't in control of. It was something that was happening in the moment. Now, it was something I could start to become aware of, but this thing, this state of mind in me, this power inside of me to create my experience, this power, we might call it thought in the moment, my thought in the moment, or thought coming to me in the moment, was just happening. And that's what was creating my experience. And on some days, my experience was, frustration and stress. And on other days, amusement and patience and kindness. So I started to get really interested in this phenomena as it happened inside of me. And the more I took a look at that, the more I saw this neutral thing just coming and going, like a bit like weather is neutral, like we can try and control the weather. Woo. We can try and control it, but good luck with that. But it is this thing, it is happening. I'm not saying it's not happening, but this inside weather was really what was creating my stress. I also to learn about through this understanding that there was a part of me that you could call the aware part of me, the part of me that is noticing, is present, the part of me that is having the stressful experience that comes and goes. And I started to notice that the more I located that or became aware of that awareness, the stress was transient. It would move through like weather, like I'd have a reaction and then I'd notice it and then it would pass. And I think before I came across this understanding, I didn't realize that there was something that was constant available and something that was a variable, and they were both real in the sense that they were happening, but I could locate myself in this constant part and have awareness of the variable. And in that space, some kind of choice was possible. So if I'm having an argument with my husband over dinner and I start to feel the feelings of stress, I would start to notice that was something I could go into or not. like the or not became an option. And before I came across this understanding that it was all me, it was all me, that I was, I didn't have that sense of the power of thought creating my experience. I thought it was all me, in the sense of I had no choice about my experience. And so this simple understanding of seeing that stress is a function of this hidden variable constantly creating our experience, but there is also a part of us that is awake and aware, that just that seeing started to create option and choice. And it does not mean that stress doesn't happen. It just means that I know what's happening when it does. And, you know, I can still get into it with my husband. Don't get me wrong. You know, we're talking about love and stress. You know, there are times in a marriage when I feel cross, but I now know that it's coming from me. It's not coming from him. It's not coming from the kids. It's not coming from my bank balance or what I weigh when I step on the scales, or whether or not I got a like on Facebook. You know, none of these things are I can get interested in that if I want or not. And I think just that knowing, you know, and I feel like I'm ready to kind of wrap up a bit now, but, you know, just that knowing has left me with something that is, I think many people in the world do not understand. And if the simple understanding of this was what they had, would be a game changer. That there is no feeling that I can experience that I need to be afraid of. And I think so many of us are afraid to feel anxiety or depression or rage or any of those feelings. So we do stuff to stop that from happening. You know, we drink, or we work, or we help, or we, you know, we do all sorts of things. We analyze, you know, we try and stop that. But actually, if I don't need to stop my feelings, because I understand they're coming from me, and I understand they will pass, and I understand that that stress I'm feeling right now is coming from that experience of thought in the moment, and I know that I can fall back into my essence, my true nature. If I know all of that, there is nothing that I need to be afraid of, including, as we were talking earlier, Laurie, an uncertain future. I don't need to be afraid of whatever is happening if I know how my experience of stress is being created. And that has been a game changer in my relationships, in my work. I've experienced death in my family. I've experienced huge financial challenges. I've experienced recently, as Laurie and I have chatted a bit, you know, changing our business model to go completely online in this COVID time. And none of those things carry with them the same, I guess I want to say fear, you know, because I know how it works. So that's my offering for the day. I hope that was helpful to someone.
That's wonderful, Elizabeth. You know, you reminded me of a story. Maybe it took place about a year or so ago. I was at a conference at a hotel for one of the 3 principals conferences, and there was a guest who was not part of our group, and he was inquiring about, you know, this is about trying to control stress. He was in a suit. He was obviously a businessman, and he was inquiring at the front desk about the 24-hour health club, the gym at the hotel, and she informed him, no, we don't have a 24-hour, you know, and she gave him the hours, and he flipped out, you know, causing, like you said, not realizing, innocently, not realizing that he was causing his stress. He needed a gym to alleviate his stress from his business meeting. And by how he thought about it, he was actually creating more stress than he could ever relieve in a gym. And I hadn't thought of that story in the longest time, but you just reminded me of that. So thank you so much. I mean, it is absolutely how we think of things, not the things that are happening. Yeah, and it's like turning the telescope around where you realize it's coming from you. Yeah, and that's what gives us that moment where we can, ah, wow, it's like an immediate relief when we wake up to that in the moment, because we don't have to get busy trying to fix what's out there and trying to change what's out there. This pandemic is teaching us one thing for sure, along with many others, but it's teaching us that we're not in control here. We're in control of very little. Um, and yeah. So who wants to go next?
Yeah, I'll go.
Greg.
Hi, my name is Greg Suchy. I live in Akron, Ohio in the US. I've been a life coach for about 5 years now, dealing mainly with addiction. Ran a webinar series for 3 years based on that. And stress really is an addiction. It's habitual thinking. There's a constant stream of thoughts that is just kind of floating around for everybody. And we train ourselves which thoughts to look for. And at some point we get in a habit of looking for stressful thoughts. And so we do, and the only way to really relieve that is to get enough likes on Facebook. I mean, there's just no other way. But, the key is when those thoughts pop up, when they come into consciousness, the key is to give them as little energy as possible, to not give them momentum. Just because a thought pops into our heads doesn't mean it's ours. It just means that it came in. I treat them like a noisy car driving by. I don't need to go out and yell at the person and tell them to turn off the car or go fix it or anything. I just let them go. It showed up on its own and it'll disappear on its own. I really don't need to do anything about it. That doesn't mean that sometimes I still don't give them energy and get caught up in it, but I catch myself much sooner and bounce back from it more quickly, rather than getting more caught up in the story of why I was stressed out. And when you get into why you're stressed out, then you're just continuing the energy in that direction. And that's why even after, even if the gym had been open and the guy went and worked out, he might have been feeling better during the workout, because when you're working out, you're more present and your body's producing a lot of feel-good chemicals. And yeah, you're less likely to be thinking about that stuff. But as soon as he's done working out and he's in the shower, maybe he could just go right back to the same thinking. Oh man, that meeting was just horrible. It was so stressful. There's so much going on. There's so much I need to do. And that's proof right there that it's self-created. It goes away and it comes back, and it goes away and it comes back. That's not really from an outside source, because the outside source already left. That noisy car drove away a long time ago, and I'm still mad that it woke me up. I could just go back to sleep, or I can lay there and I could go, that person really should fix their car, or at least not drive it around at 3 o'clock in the morning, or whatever. And every single time I entertain those thoughts, I'm reinforcing that pattern. But every time those thoughts pop up and I decide instead to go do something that I enjoy doing, then I'm creating a new pattern. And the more I focus on that new pattern, the less likely I am to fall for the old one. It just starts to kind of fizzle on its own. Because in my experience, I don't believe that we can just get rid of habits. We have to make new ones. The new ones replace the old ones. Nature abhors a vacuum. You can't just leave a vacant space. So that's why so many people have such a hard time with stress and stuff like that, is that they're trying to get rid of it. There's nothing to get rid of. It's not even real. It's an illusion. It's a convincing illusion, but it's not real. All it takes is just taking that time to quiet our minds, whether it be working out or going for a walk in nature or crafting or whatever it is that you enjoy doing. That's where your focus should be. That's where you should give your energy to, rather than that stressful thinking, because that stress is always about something that isn't here right now. You know, it's always about something that happened or something we're worried is going to happen. But if we really look at the present moment, it's not really that bad. You know, for the most part, there's things that happen and we go through them and we feel those emotions, and then we create a story. And that story is what we carry on, and that continues the stress and the anxiety, and really the ultimate answer to it is that we're not loving ourselves fully when we allow ourselves to get into those places. So you're right, Lori, this is still a topic about love. You know, it's self-love. And if we truly understand who we are and the power that we have in our thinking to create our own version of reality, if we really truly understand that at a deep level, then we're going to create a better version. We're never going to be without that story. The question is, what kind of story do you want? Which one are you going to create? Do I create the one that when I get stressed out, I go get drunk or high or go shopping or go gambling or whatever? Or do I create that story that when I get stressed out, I practice self-love? It really is that simple. Not always easy, but it is that simple. We're creating a story moment by moment. And we always want everybody else's stories to match ours too. When they don't, we get upset. We throw a temper tantrum. We stomp our feet. Everybody should see this the way I see it. I'm stressed out. Why aren't you so stressed out? You know, it's amazing the stories we tell ourselves. And if you really truly take a look at that for yourself, you'll see it. You'll start to see that story as it's occurring, and you'll catch yourself. And once you catch yourself, then you're already well on your way to creating a much better story. That's my take on it.
You know, I'd love for you to share, Greg, if you could, for a few minutes. I know I had seen you and Harry on a webinar. You know, you could also, I forget the name of your YouTube channel with webinars on alcohol and substance abuse. I know that you had yourself had, like, I guess, a bit of an epiphany, right? That totally shifted things for you. If you could just say a little bit about that, and also the name of your YouTube station.
Yeah, the YouTube channel and our Facebook group are both called Addiction, Alcoholism, and the Three Principles. And I spent more than a decade of my life, really kind of all my 20s, I wasted just being drunk and high all the time, just trying to avoid these stressful feelings and all the, you know, all the stuff I didn't like, you know, constantly going out and yelling at that noisy car. And I ended up, through an incident with my ex-wife where she ended up trying to kill herself. We ended up in AA. And I noticed very quickly that there were a lot of people who had a lot of sobriety. They had a long time, but they weren't happy. And then I noticed that there were some people there who really didn't have a lot of time as far as AA is concerned, maybe just a couple of years, and they were just loving life. You know, when they went up and spoke in a meeting, it was just like you could feel their energy just radiating through you, and you felt better just being in their presence. And so I started gravitating toward those people and asking them what they were doing. And somebody introduced me to Emmett Fox in his book, The Sermon on the Mount, which is a metaphysical viewpoint of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in the Bible. And it was really my first introduction to this idea that thoughts have power, that they create our reality. And yeah, I ended up in a study group with it and everything. And we're going through this book together. And about actually it was exactly 5 months into sobriety, I went to, it was Thanksgiving Day in the US, and around here well, obviously not now, but with the pandemic, but they would rent out a school gymnasium, and there would hold a gratitude meeting. And there was, 200 some people there, and everybody got like 30 seconds, say what they're grateful for, and then you go on to the next person. So there was a lot of that really good, loving energy in the room. And at the end of the meeting, when we all joined hands to say a prayer, as soon as I touched the people next to me, I was no longer there in physical form. I saw the energy behind life. And I saw how everything was connected and really made out of that same energy, it just vibrating at a different frequency. And it left me no longer wanting to escape. I suddenly felt like, the addiction issues that I'd had were no longer a problem. And I still didn't understand really what happened to me. And I wasn't really able to find the answer within AA. Unfortunately, the answer I tended to get was that they didn't know what happened to me, but it was probably dangerous and going to end up killing me. But I knew that wasn't right. So I ended up joining a unity church, again, metaphysical kind of thing, and just trying to find some kind of answer. And one Sunday, I noticed in the bulletin, it just said new meeting, 3 principles. And it didn't really explain what it was, but I felt called to go. And it really opened up a lot of understanding for me on what I actually experienced in 2012, which is that I met myself, I met God, I met all of you. I saw that oneness that Sid was talking about. And that energetic flow really does include everything. It includes all of our thoughts. It includes money. It includes stress. It includes whatever it is. It's all out there. Every possibility exists in every moment. Like I said, we've just trained ourselves to only see certain ones. We're walking around with a funky prescription on our glasses and wondering why we can't see well. And all we have to do is just readjust our prescription, and we can do that ourselves. We can change our vision by changing our thinking. And it's really is that simple. And I know, and when I first came across this, I'm like, it's too simple. There has to be some kind of exception. There has to be something to it. And honestly, my first year in the principles, I kind of set out to prove them wrong, which I think really helped me out more than anything else. I couldn't find one single instance. There's no exception. It's like, yeah, I just created that. Yes, something happened, but you could have 100 people at the same event and have 100 different ideas of what happened. The event didn't change. We all create our own version of reality.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's great to see how we're all one thought away from a better experience all the time.
Yeah.
When that thought hits, we don't know, but it's nice to know that that's a possibility, because it kind of puts you in that receptive mode for a better thought. Thank you. So who's going to be next?
Go on, Hannah.
My turn? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Chana Studley, and I'm originally from England, but I live in Israel. I'm in Jerusalem right now. It's kind of warm. And thank you so much for having us. This is such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed listening to everybody so far. What was coming to me while I was listening is the stress that showed up in my life. Like Elizabeth was saying, and Greg, I always thought it was from outside things. And my story is that I was mugged 3 times. And it's bad enough being mugged one time, but it actually happened to me 3 times. And I got some serious injuries as a result of that. I had a fractured skull and broken neck and herniated discs, and consequently I had PTSD. And this was back in the early 80s when it was only just beginning to become a diagnosis, and we'll leave that over there. So my experience of that was that I was stuck in my house, I was stuck in my head, and I was constantly living in this state of fear and trauma and terrified to go out, terrified to engage with anybody, because I knew the world was a dangerous place. And you couldn't have convinced me otherwise, because I had evidence. I had police reports and x-rays to prove it. And so I got into a very, very dark, very small place, which I now see was just like totally constricted by my thinking. And luckily I had an experience where it was almost like my brain blew a fuse, and like the thinking was going so fast and so painful in my head. It's just like it just suddenly went quiet, which actually was a bit frightening in itself. And luckily I found some people who really helped me to understand that, and to see that I'd created a story around what had happened to me. It was bad enough what had happened, but I was living in the story about what had happened to me. And so one of the first things they said to me was I willing to let go of the story? And when I heard that at first, I was like, what I heard was that it didn't happen and it didn't hurt and I should get over it. And I'm screaming, but it did happen and I can't get over it. And but what they started showing me and pointing me in the direction of was that what I was living in was the thoughts about what had happened to me. And for the next probably 25 years, I got better emotionally. I got stuck in the self-help aisle at the bookstore, like a lot of us, trying different things, different. I got into A Course in Miracles, into the Enneagram, and all these different kinds of things, writing gratitude lists, and just I got very vigilant about watching my thinking, because I'd seen how dark thinking can take you to a very dark place. And I didn't want to go back there. I'd gotten myself out of that PTSD, out of that, now I was like functioning, and I was, had a career going, and I was up and out and living my life. But I was like, I had the thought police employed full time to keep an eye on my thinking. And that whenever it went a bit dark or a bit down, I'd be like, no, it's not allowed. And now when I look back on that, the vigilance that I originally had about, the safety out there had turned inward. And unbeknownst to me, this was causing chronic pain. And this is the work I do now, is that I had chronic pain for 25 years. I had terrible back pain. My back the muscles in my back would seize up, and then my pelvis would get shifted, and then I'd get sciatica pain shooting down my leg. And sometimes I'd wake up with a numb arm because the doctor would say, oh, well, that's because the nerve is coming out of your neck where it was broken, or you have one leg longer than the other. That's why your pelvis is unstable. And because I'm not a doctor, I would just believe them. But what I know now is that the stress I was experiencing, either reliving the traumas that had happened to me, or living just life that was, I had a big career in Hollywood, so I felt like I was under a lot of pressure all the time, which was really self-created. And so that for me was manifesting in this back pain. And I didn't know that. It was, like we all say, it was an innocent misunderstanding. And so when I came across the 3 principles, I was so taken by these ideas. I was so in love with them immediately, because I'd been searching and looking for a long, long time. And like when you find people that are just talking truth, and it just rings true to you, I just like fell in love with it. And so I did some training to be a 3 principles practitioner. And after I'd finished this training, I noticed my pain had gone away. And I mentioned to someone that this had happened, And she started me on this journey of looking into pain research and finding out, you know, how the fight or flight system can dysregulate your nervous system, which then is not giving enough blood supply to your muscles and to maybe to your gut. That's why people can have stomach problems, they can have fertility problems, they can have migraines, eczema. There's all kinds of ways that our bodies can physically get affected by stress. And as I started understanding this, it suddenly made perfect sense to me that my pain went away when my thinking started to slow down. When I started to understand how the mind works, my nervous system got the message that I was safe because I was living more in the moment, and in the moment we're okay, you know, like the other speakers were saying. And so my body didn't need to be in pain anymore because I was living in a much safer environment in my mind. And so as I started putting all these jigsaw pieces together, I wondered if I could recreate this in other people. And so I got 5 volunteers to be my guinea pigs. And I kind of, I spent 10 hours with each person and giving over these ideas. And they all started to get better. And some more than others, but you know, there was definitely improvement into everybody. And when I finished my research with these 5 volunteers, one of the things that they all said to me in their own way was that they were so touched that I knew that they were well. You know, because when you've been in pain for a very long time, if you've had, you know, chronic back pain, or some people it's knees, some people's headaches, some people's stomach problems, you know, and you've been going to doctor after doctor and chiropractors and acupuncture and the homeopath and, you know, and the osteopath, and then we're all trying all these different things. And then we try the weird and wonderful things, and then some people are journaling and some people are meditating, all trying to fix this problem. They said that one of the things that came out of this understanding was that that I knew that they were well, that they weren't broken, and they didn't need fixing, and that meant a lot to them because they'd been treated like a broken body and a broken, you know, mind and a broken spirit for so long that it was so refreshing to them. And I think that went a long way to helping them feel better. And so now when I talk to someone and they want to keep listing all the physical things that are wrong with them, and they want to, you know, they're blaming the boss and blaming the family and blaming the COVID and blaming the government, you know, that's why I'm stressed and that's why my back keeps going out. It's like I've learned to just keep talking to them. And I was going to say talking to that well part of them, but that's like talking about the wet part of the ocean, right? You know, it's like we are well, we are whole, we are, you know, we have well-being. It is our, you know, like our factory default setting. And what I see now is that all that thinky thoughts and stinky thoughts and negative thinking has just come on top of it. And like somebody else said, it's like we fall into the illusion of seeing believing that's true. And what I've noticed, especially with people with chronic pain, is we're very perfectionist and goodist, and we've got to do it the right way. And that frustration that comes from being in a judgmental place all the time, it brings about a very tense kind of thinking. And so once that tenseness starts to dissolve, because you start seeing that it is just an illusion, and being responsible doesn't mean I have to fix and change everything and everybody. It's like, oh, I get to relax, and I just get to watch people, you know, their pain starts to melt away, and they start getting, you know, these amazing insights. And some of the insights I've had now of seeing that, like, we only experience pain when it comes into consciousness. You know, so depending on my level of consciousness, my state of mind, or my mood even, I can still like get some pain sometimes. Like if I stub my toe or I burnt my thumb really badly the other week. And I see that if I'm in a bad mood and I burn my thumb, right, it's going to be a lot more painful than if I'm in a good mood. And so not being frightened of that mood and not having anything on it, things like, you know, a burnt thumb or a bit of a backache or whatever is going on, or it could be, you know, a financial thing or family relationships, or whatever it is, when I don't have anything on it, it can pass through, and I don't have to be frightened of it. And then my nervous system gets to, have a break, and I get to, I just get to be in the moment and be okay with it. And that has been such a, it's been such a great thing for me, and be able to share that with other people. It's been such a privilege. So thank you.
Oh, lovely. And Hannah, I know your book reads like a thriller. If I didn't know it was an autobiography, it would be under the category of a thriller. Say the name of it again. I know you're coming out with another book.
Right. My first book, it's a novel, and it's called The Myth of Low Self-Esteem. And I'd say about 80% of it is true. There's a lot about it's about a girl called Deborah, but she's kind of like my alter ego, I guess. And, there's a lot about the trauma and all the darkness that came after that. And then I had this big Hollywood career. So it's like there's lots of, name dropping with movie stars and stuff that happened. And then, finding these principles and finding these ideas that are just like so freeing in so many areas. For me, it was trauma. And now chronic pain, but it's such a neutral, beautiful, simple truth that you can apply to anything. So my next book is it's called Painless, and it's a chronic pain adventure novel, because the world needs a chronic pain adventure novel. Because what I found is like, I love reading research. I love seeing like the characters involved in, like, who shows up for a chronic pain research. There's got to be some kind of like strange thing going on, and so when I read this, I see characters and I see stories. So for people who don't want to sit and read research, at the end of a long day, and to get that information, my idea is to like put this information into stories, and then hopefully people can relate to the characters who are doing their searching and growing and questioning and challenging and insights and exploring. And so this next one is going to be about chronic pain. I have a whole bunch of people who've got different physical issues, and they all get to, not all of them, because not everybody gets it. That wouldn't be realistic. But they all have a journey with this understanding. And then I've already started writing book 3 and 4, which are going to be about, one's going to be about hormones, and one's going to be about drug company corruption, a bit of controversy there. And so, they're kind of like stories based on characters who are maybe suffering and exploring and finding out truth and healing. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. It's Austin's turn.
Hey, Laurie, and thank you, everyone. That was superb hearing your stories, and some really great stuff that I was listening to there, which Elizabeth, when you started talking about leadership coaching, actually, I probably would have been your ideal client a few years ago, where I was leading high pressure software sales teams across Europe for IBM. And I'm now a software seller myself for an American software firm. So I feel the pressure on a daily basis. My boss is calling me, where's the orders, where's the sales? And at the same time, I'm a parent and I'm a husband, and it's very easy to reach for the wine at the end of the day and try and unwind and things. But really, my story is mainly around my son. So I'm working this high pressure job, and my son, who is a teenager, he got sectioned a couple of years ago, and he was hearing voices and was suicidal and things, and it was a pretty tough time. So in the UK, sectioned is put in a mental hospital, all your rights are taken away, and doctors can do whatever they want to you. It's pretty scary, and I was very, very lucky that I'd already found this understanding that we were talking about, and I was able to bring that to that situation over a year's time period, where just as Hannah was talking about, you get labeled with everything. My son was being told he was absolutely broken on a daily basis by many health professionals, and had been for some years. And it was, I was just able to cope with the situation incredibly well. I didn't take time off work. I was still doing my job, and going to the hospital 4 or 5 times a week. And I was able to find the space to know how to handle the situation, which is incredible. I mean, you get no support as a parent in these situations at all. It's very tough. But I was lucky. I'd come across Dr. Bill Pettit, who I'm sure many of you know. And he has these incredible stories of hope. And in every situation, I think often we, wherever it is, you kind of get, this is how you should deal with stress, or, oh, this is how you deal with addiction, or whatever it is, sort of thing. But very rarely do you get, and here are so many people that have overcome it just like that. And so listen to Bill just gave me loads of hope that my son wasn't broken, and he was amazing. And yes, he had some pretty crappy thinking at that time, but that thinking could change in any instant. And so it was amazing through that time to just get a load of insights along the way, where, you know, there would be a meeting coming up where the doctors were going to forcefully inject him with drugs, which was just crazy stuff, really. And before that meeting, I would just be quiet and be led to a research paper that was particularly relevant, that said why these doctors should not do that and they should take a different course. You know, and I'd walk in with all this research that I knew nothing about. You know, I'm no expert in this stuff. I'd never come across it before, you know, and I'd walk into this meeting like a pro going, whoa, here's all this good stuff. And they go, you're absolutely right. Let's not put them on drugs. Yeah, let's have a different approach. And I think there were two big breakthroughs that I had. One was that they'd been trying to label him with many things, psychosis, ASD, all these things. And one day I just sat with him, and we were just sat there, not talking about anything, just being quiet for a minute. And I just had this thought pop in, which said, something's happened to you, hasn't it? And he said, boom. Oh, you got it, Dad. You know, you've just seen it there. And he didn't share what it was, but it just changed the whole course of how everybody saw him. Was not that he was broken, but that something had happened to him, and he was just responding to that in the best way he could, was the best thinking that he had at that time. And so they stopped trying to label him and you know, inject him with drugs and all crazy stuff. And the other big insight that I had was a couple of months later on. He'd stopped washing, and he wouldn't take his clothes off, which is incredibly difficult to deal with. Didn't smell great as a teenager, as you can imagine. And so they were on the verge of force stripping him and showering him, which would just make things worse, and horrible. And we had a conversation. We were out walking in the woods, and I just said to him, you know, you have dealt with things the best way you know how, and perhaps those things that you've used to help you all this time don't serve you anymore. Perhaps you don't need them anymore. And the next day I got a call from the hospital saying, you're not going to believe this. He's woken up this morning, he's showered, he's changed his clothes. Who is this kid? What have you done to him? You know? And there was just this complete transformation. And 2 weeks later, he was released from hospital. He's never looked back. They've actually removed his diagnosis of ASD, which is unbelievable. It's almost unheard of. He has no problems. He's no professionals look after him. He's doing an apprenticeship in IT. He's an incredible kid. Yeah, I've been very, very lucky to to be able to share a lot of time with him, and he's taught me so many things through this time, really. So yeah, it's my story.
Oh, it's a beautiful story. My goodness. And for people in Connecticut who will be listening to this, the Bill Pettit you're referring to is a psychiatrist in the Midwest. And he has a website with his wife, who's a psychologist, the Doctors Pettits. And I love how, their theme is never broken, nothing broken, never lacking, something along those lines. And it's so true that we all have an innate health that we can rely upon and depend upon, that every one of you spoke to, all four of you spoke to. We're going to have to end soon, but I want to know if anybody wants to add anything before I'll tell my quick story. Any additions? And if something comes to you, we'll have a few minutes. But the story I was going to add is of a man who was going through a divorce, came to see me, and his wife, he did not want the divorce. And his wife was told by her attorney not to see me, that she should not see me. They're getting a divorce. If you go to see Lori, she's going to try to get you back together again. I don't even think she knew, what I do. And any marriage counselor, I guess, was the fear. So fast forward a couple of months, the old stress questionnaire, I don't even know, it may still be circulating in some places, but according to the number of things you check off, that was going to tell you your level of stress. So if you had two major, and they were all about major changes, if you had two major changes in a year's time, I believe that's how it went. I mean, I don't know if that's still around, but that was the thinking. So, if this man had two major life changes in less than 1 month, in a couple of weeks, he moved out of his home and the divorce was final. And he told me, we met shortly after that, those two occurrences, he said he's never felt better. And he and his ex-wife have a better relationship now than they ever did. What do you think changed? Their thinking changed. She had a bunch of thinking. I don't know. I never spoke with her, but it sounds to me like she had a lot of thinking about what it meant to be married, and maybe his behavior under the auspices of marriage. Who knows? But the theme is their thinking changed, and that's what allowed them. It's unfortunate they had to go through those major life changes. If they understood what the four of you were talking about, this understanding about thought, how our own personal thinking is our experience, moment to moment. It's not because of the partner, the marriage, the big house, it's not because of anything external to what's going on inside of us. So if they knew that, they could have avoided a lot of that upheaval and upset if they knew that ahead of time. I mean, so many people have been on the verge of divorce, and when they get this understanding, it reverses. That's how the book, The Secret of Love, came about, because of all these people who recaptured love that they thought was lost. So Anything else? We've got 5 minutes left. Looks like you can.
That was such a timely story. I had a funny experience this week when I was walking the dog on Tuesday morning, and I saw a woman sat in her pajamas in a bush, barefoot, looking bedraggled, and I was like, what is going on here? You know, I'm gonna have to phone the police. She's clearly not well or whatever. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, let me chat and see how she is. And she just had a huge row with her husband half an hour ago and just needed to get out, you know. And I just got to spend 2 minutes with her saying, hey, look, it's just like the clouds. The sunshine's still there in your relationship and whatever, just a bit cloudy right now, and that's going to blow over, and you're still awesome. Whether he's telling you you're awesome or not, you're still awesome, you know. And she just went, wow, that was exactly what I needed to hear. It doesn't matter what he says, I'm still awesome. Right, I'm going home. Brilliant. So great timing. Thanks, Laurie.
That's a great story. Yeah. And
just something that really occurred to me as you were talking, and what I've seen is at the heart really of a lot of stressful experience is a particular thought. And the thought is, it shouldn't be this way. And I just really want to throw that in because it was in everyone's stories, you know, that whenever we're in that and it looks real, it shouldn't be this way, then we suffer. And, you know, pain happens, you know, abuse happens, people try and kill themselves, you know, we get mugged, you know, I fight with my husband, or, you know, I go into a hotel room and they don't have a bath and I think they should. You know, it doesn't really matter what the thing is, but the thinking it shouldn't be that way is where the pain and suffering lies, and which is, you know, when I'm onto that, I'm free.
oh, thank you. Yeah, great addition. You know what you reminded me of, Elizabeth? I mean, we could go for another hour, right? But
We could.
You know how Sid Banks talked about, look at what is, not at what isn't?
Mm.
Boy, through the years, that has just become so much more helpful to me. The more I see that in life, it just has been so very helpful. And, you know, that's the story we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves this what isn't story. I wish it was this other way. And, you know, what's wrong with me thinking, and what's wrong with everybody else kind of thinking. That's the what isn't. But if you look at what is, and you find so much to be grateful for, that just lifts you up into a whole different state of mind. And that's where incredible things happen. We're more productive, we're more energetic, we're more loving, we're more compassionate in those higher states. So, well,
Yeah, look for what's right instead of looking for what's wrong.
yes.
It's that training of our habits. Which direction are we going to look in?
Right, yeah. Well, thank you all so much for, you know, different times of the day for you, and you still were able to show up, and it's just been lovely. And for people watching, I hope you join us next month for another round.